Look at all the stories making the headlines this Saturday. It's the very latest ITV News.
The Gaza ceasefire holds for another exchange of hostages and prisoners. One hostage is reunited with his wife and the daughter he'd never met, born during his captivity. And celebrations in the West Bank too, as Israel releases more than 350 detainees. Also tonight, the family of a British couple detained in Iran call for their safe return. A manhunt is underway after a woman is shot dead outside a village pub on Valentine's Day. And
this is ITV News with Gamal Fahnbulleh.
good evening. Fears this week that a sixth planned swap of Israeli hostages and Palestinian detainees would not go ahead subsided today, as 3 more Israelis held in captivity were returned to their families. Meanwhile, more than 350 Palestinians were released in the occupied West Bank amid scenes of jubilations. Tensions remain high, though, with many of the free detainees forced to wear Israeli prison sweatshirts with the words "We will not forget or forgive" printed on them. Ian Woods reports.
Sergei Dekolchan fell into his wife's embrace, while his parents patiently waited their turn to welcome him back from captivity. "My love, you are a champion," cried Avital. When they last saw each other, she was 7 months pregnant. Their daughter is now more than a year old. Until now, he didn't even know her name. When he was told the child is called Shahar, he replied, "Perfect." It was a reunion that appeared to be in serious jeopardy. Hamas had threatened to cancel this, the 6th hostage handover, amid signs that the fragile peace deal with Israel was falling apart. But on schedule, Dekolchan appeared with 2 other Israelis, Er Horn and Sasha Trufanov, prompting joy and relief from families at home watching on television, as well as those gathered in Tel Aviv. This was a more choreographed, less chaotic handover than before, and the prisoners appeared healthier than the emaciated trio released last week. The men were given gifts and encouraged to make speeches in support of further hostage releases. But the number of heavily armed fighters, some carrying captured Israeli weapons, will infuriate critics of the peace deal who demanded Hamas be wiped out. Sasha Trufanov was hugged tightly by his mother and his girlfriend, but learned that his father had been killed during the October the 7th attack on their kibbutz. As part of the deal, 369 more Palestinian prisoners were freed from Israeli jails. Most had been swept up and detained without charge. Just before their release, they had been forced to wear sweatshirts with the Star of David and the words, "We will never forget or forgive." They made it clear what they thought of them as soon as they were released. But there was also burning resentment at how they said they'd been treated in jail. This man said he'd been hungry and thirsty for a year and had lost 40 kilos in weight. And several prisoners were taken straight to hospital amid concerns about their condition. More releases are expected next week, but with complaints about broken promises and demands from President Trump that Palestinians should be forced to leave Gaza, the families of other hostages can only wait and hope that they too will be reunited. Ian Woods, ITV News.
Meanwhile, here, thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched to the US Embassy in London today. The demonstrators gathered in Westminster before setting off for the embassy. It follows suggestions from President Trump that the population of Gaza could be displaced to allow for redevelopment, and many marchers held signs with slogans such as "Trump, hands off Gaza." The family of a British couple detained in Iran have said they are determined to secure their safe return. Craig and Lindsay Foreman had been visiting the country as part of a motorbike trip across the world. But today, the Foreign Office confirmed they are being held on what Iranian state media called unspecified security charges. Our political correspondent, Lucy McDade, has the latest.
Here we are in the depths of the Armenian countryside.
They were travelling the world and said they knew they were taking risks, but hoped they would be rewarded.
We are in Yerevan, heading for the border of Iran.
Craig and Lindsay Foreman were bound for Australia on motorbikes, wanting to learn more about people and different cultures.
Morning. It's Boxing Day. It's day 59.
But today the Foreign Office confirmed the couple are being detained after Iranian state media said they were being held on unspecified security-related charges. In a statement, their family said, "This unexpected turn of events has caused significant concern for our entire family, and we are united in our determination to secure their safe return." Tonight, the Foreign Office says it remains in close contact with local authorities in Iran, while the official advice is not to travel to the country and warns that British and British-Iranian dual nationals are at significant risk of being arrested, detained or questioned.
Cheers to Spain.
Before leaving, the pair appeared on Channel 4's A New Life in the Sun, doing up their Spanish home to rent out ahead of their travels.
The goal is to create a sort of oasis in the national park that people can literally come and never leave if they don't want to.
They'd said they were going to Iran despite the risks, but now those risks have become their reality. While 4,000 miles away tonight, their families wait for news. They'll be back soon. Lucy McDade, ITV News.
The French president has invited European leaders, including Sir Keir Starmer, to Paris for an emergency summit on Ukraine. Downing Street says the Prime Minister will attend the meeting, expected to take place early next week. It follows Donald Trump's efforts to negotiate an end to the conflict with Russia without including Europe or Ukraine, something Volodymyr Zelensky strongly criticised at the Munich Security Conference today. Caroline Lewis reports.
What do you hope to get from today, sir?
The Ukrainian president entered the security conference for day 2, and today he wasn't pulling any punches.
Ukraine will never accept deals made behind our backs without our involvement.
Ukraine's relationship with the US has begun to falter. Today, Zelensky suggested, with Trump at the helm, America may not be the ally it once was.
We must build the armed forces of Europe so that Europe's future depends only on Europeans, and decisions about Europe are made in Europe.
On the ground, the fight continues. And yesterday, a drone carrying a high-explosive warhead struck the protective containment shell of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Russia denied responsibility. Today, the Foreign Secretary reaffirmed the UK was committed to what he called an irreversible pathway for Ukraine's NATO membership.
That is the cheapest and it is the best mechanism to secure peace, not just in Europe, but across the Euro-Atlantic.
But took a more measured approach when it came to the unpredictable president.
I would encourage Donald Trump and the Ukrainians to look very carefully at a deepening partnership over the next generations.
The conference thus far has been littered with feisty speeches and the trading of barbs, but with little clarity on what comes next. Caroline Lewis, ITV News.
Staying in Munich, a 37-year-old woman and her 2-year-old daughter have died of their injuries after a car was driven into a crowd there on Thursday. 35 others were injured in the attack. Police have a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker in custody. And a 14-year-old boy has died in an apparently random stabbing attack in Austria. 4 men were injured in the incident in the southern village of Vallach. Police say the 23-year-old suspect is a Syrian national with legal residence in Austria. Back here, a manhunt is underway tonight after a woman was shot and killed outside a pub in Kent yesterday evening. Kent's police say they found the suspect's car and a gun near a bridge over the Thames, but they have not yet located him. Rosie Dowsing reports from the scene in the village of Knockholt.
The pub in this quaint village is usually the central hub of the community, but it's closed tonight after a murder on its doorstep. Outside, a woman in her 40s was shot dead. A male suspect fled the scene. Couples would have been enjoying a Valentine's Day meal in their local village pub when they heard fatal gunshots outside last night at around 7 o'clock. Knockholt is a small and quiet village in Kent, now with a community in shock.
I heard just after 7 o'clock several loud noises. People had to stay away. Nobody was allowed into the area, and it was until this morning we found out more information. Everybody I've spoken to been in shock and disbelief. It's hard to imagine.
As part of their inquiries, Kent Police recovered a vehicle containing a gun on the Dartford Crossing Bridge over the Thames. The detective said call handlers received reports of a man on the wrong side of the barrier, and we are not ruling out the possibility that he may have entered the water. The suspect is thought to have been known to the victim, and police are not looking for anyone else. This time of year, candles and flowers are usually a symbol of romance, but tonight they're one of grief. Rosie Dowsing, ITV News.
The NHS is expanding its automatic testing for HIV and hepatitis to more hospitals in England. Almost 90 will now routinely check blood for the infections unless patients opt out. The Health Service says more than 7,000 cases have already been identified by the programme that might otherwise have been missed. Louisa Britton has spoken to one patient who credits the programme with saving his life.
Sean has spent the last 9 months recovering after a seizure left him in hospital for weeks. The culmination of an illness which, once tested for, was confirmed as HIV.
Mine was only just caught in time. I probably had another couple of weeks before it would have been too late. But I was actually relieved just to be admitted into hospital because I was just so exhausted.
And now knowing that you were that close to potentially not surviving?
That still comes back to haunt me. How close it was. Not so much that my life would have ended, but it's who you leave behind.
The scheme that saved Sean's life is now expanding to a further 30 A&E departments in England, bringing the total to 89. It's expected it will enable the NHS to detect an additional 1,900 cases a year. That's on top of the more than 7,000 cases of HIV, hepatitis B and C already identified.
Stigma is really having a big impact here, but that's why we're normalising it in the system. It's not an opt-in test, it's an opt-out test. You're not being targeted because of how you look or what community you're from or where in the country you live. Everyone who goes to A&E and has their bloods taken is going to be tested for HIV.
Earlier this week, Sir Keir Starmer became the first sitting Prime Minister to publicly take an HIV test, part of a pledge to eliminate new transmissions by 2030. And for patients like Sean, the new automatic testing will mean access to the right treatment and support. Louisa Britton, ITV News.
Finally, in the Premier League, Arsenal have closed the gap on leaders Liverpool to 4 points. Despite an injury crisis, the Gunners won 2-0 at Leicester thanks to 2 late goals from a striker they never even knew they had. Here's Chris Cudder.
It might yet prove a pivotal day in Arsenal's title bid. Battling through an injury crisis, relying on kids and veterans is hardly ideal. In contrast, the Wolves are gathering around Leicester's relegation. Title hopes might be slipping away. But then came the masterstroke.
Yeah, the title race is getting close. And that is it. The national and local weather forecasts are next. But from all of us here on the Weekend News team, many thanks indeed for watching. A very good night. Bye-bye.